Good evening. Here we go with another lecture, I think 7th or 8th in a row. And today we will talk about one, I think, very interesting topic. And the name of this topic is mobility versus stability, or how I like to call it, the silver bullet of modern day training practice. So, first of all, a little bit of intro for this special topic. When we are considering how to become the top elite athlete, we can say that there are sport achievement determinants, and we can say that there are three main determinants of sport success. So first is genetics, and the well-known physiologist from the 20th century, Prof, used to say, if you want to become an Olympic champion, you must choose your parents wisely. What does it mean? It means that genetic is very important in achieving sport success. If you don't have genetics, you will hardly achieve top-level performance in any kind of sports. And just one example for you. For example, arguably the best sprinter ever, Carl Lewis, he won, I don't know, 9 gold Olympics medals, etc., etc. But his father, for example, was a professional NFL top elite player, and his mother was a 4-meter track USA team Olympic member. So you know, it is most likely that Carl Lewis has had brilliant genetics, a top-level father, top-level athlete father, and top-level athlete mother, and then they combine and the Carl Lewis was born. So he fulfilled these requirements of being genetically gifted in order to achieve top-level sport achievement. Another second determinant of sport success is diet or supplementation. And you know, other than genetic and training, what an athlete eats is probably the third most important thing in becoming top-level athletes. And nowadays we have all sorts of dietitians, and almost in any top-level club in most respectful sports, there are dietitian who is or bachelor or master or even PhD level degree guy, or male or female, who is responsible for diets and supplementation on a regular basis in order to achieve top level performance. But maybe the most influential determinant of sport success is, of course, the training process or the process per se. And we can say that there are new trends directed by science, and in every year, annually, there are over 25,000 articles published related to somehow related to sports science. For example, talking about dietitian, talking about the training process, talking about new trends in training and planning and executing training process. So we can say that this sports science evolved rapidly, and the amount of research on a daily basis or annually is tremendous. And we can say that development of sports technology is similar to IT technology. So what does it basically mean? Similar to IT, if you have the best technology 5 years ago and you are not developing it, like in IT, you know, you will become outdated very easily, very easily. So like in IT, you know, the best phone this year, if it doesn't develop, the next year this best phone is more or less not even in the top 10. So it is the similar in sports technology or in sports science. So it is very important to see what is relatively new, or what are the new trends in sports science, and this is what we are going to talk about today. So the main question in sports science always is what's new? What is the new trend? What are the new trends? What is the new training method or similar? So when we are considering what is new in sports science, we can say that in the last couple of years there is a new new trend, and it is called the prehabilitation. And why this is the new trend? Because we can see that all over the sports, in all sorts of sports, the injury incidence is increasing. So there are more and more events, more and more games, more and more contests, tournaments, and injury is increasing annually, and the costs of the injuries are huge. So comparing to maybe 20 or 30 years ago, now the whole strength and conditioning process, or let's say the whole training process, is vastly directed to one special issue: how not to get injured. Because the best ability of one player is availability, and the best quality of today modern day top level athletes, especially in soccer, but also in other sport disciplines, is to be available to play the game. So one of the hot topic in sports science and generally in everyday practice in the past 5 to 10 years is what can we do not to get injured, for our players not to get injured, or can we understand the mechanisms of why those players get injured in the first instance. So that has pretty much transferred to training process in the last 5 to 10 years. We transfer the concept of our process, and we start to understand that maybe we need some kind of functional training, or let's say we need to train the movement and not the muscle per se. So if we are developing the strength level of biceps muscles of upper arm, for example, in the movement that is not directly related to sport movement, it may be that we don't do anything good to this muscle, because we increase the level of strength, but also increase the chance of injury. So what we are starting to understand in the past 5 to 10 years is that it is most likely that if we have a non-optimal movement pattern, then we will have some kind of compensation, and because of compensation we will have some kind of disbalance in our body, and it will increase the chance for our player to get injured. So one of the reasons for injury is to have a non-optimal movement pattern. And when we are thinking about the whole locomotor system of our body, we can say that we produce the movements within our joints. And two of the most respectable strength and conditioning coaches and physiotherapists, Michael Boyle and Gray Cook, some 10 years ago maybe, they were thinking about this, and they were discussing about this between each other, and they produced some very interesting theory about getting injury. Namely, they discussed the movement of the joints, and Gray Cook came up with some brilliant idea. So that he said that most likely dysfunctional joint or dysfunctional movement within the joint will increase the risk of injury. So he said that injuries are directly related with suboptimal joint movement, and that joints are responsible in let's say like this, that the joints are responsible for injuries. And they came up with some theory that they called joint by joint approach, which is excellent, and we'll discuss it in more details. So they said that our body is basically made of stack of joints placed one on another, and that every joint within our body has its specific function and is prone to predictable dysfunction. So consequently, every joint has its specific needs that should be met by exercise. And when we are dealing with this joint-by-joint approach, we can say that, simply put, it's something like this. So our body is made of stack of joints that are stack of joints. That means that they are one on another, and each specific joint has its specific function. For example, they said ankle should be mobile. The knee should possess a high level of stability. The lumbar, the hip should be both mobile and stable, but most of us has an issue with the hip mobility. The lumbar spine should have stability. The thoracic spine should have mobility, the shoulder should have mobility, and the scapula should have stability. So you see, every athlete basically is made of stack of joints, and the joints should be mobile, stable, mobile, stable, mobile, stable, mobile, stable, and so on and so on. And what they said, if the joint that should have mobility doesn't possess enough mobility, it can produce problems. So basically this is joint by joint approach, and they said, so basically we should check joint by joint to see if there is any dysfunction, and we should correct this dysfunction with some corrective exercise or rehabilitation exercises. And why they say this? When we are considering our baby, we have a neurodevelopment. As a baby, we have tremendous amount of joint mobility. We maintain this as children through play, and as adults, we start to lose mobility, mostly due to positional and postural habits. So, in the first phases of our life, we have tremendous mobility, you can see on this slide. But somehow, during the childhood and getting closer to adulthood, somehow we lose this mobility. Look at these children with a brilliant posture and brilliant position, and somehow we develop this. So most of us lack hip mobility. And as Shakira would like to say, hips don't lie. So as an adult, we have a hips that generally has poor mobility, which is the result of too much sitting posture, lack of squatting, lack of this movement pattern that we used to regularly do during our childhood. And what does it bring us to? If we lack a hip mobility, then we have decreased length in hip flexors and reciprocally have inhibition of the gluteus muscles. And when we have this, we can have some serious issue. What is the sequel of hip mobility? If we lack mobility in the hip region, then it changes the functional movement pattern. We need increased mobility somewhere, or above or below. So if we don't have enough hip mobility in our hip region, some other joint must take over this hip mobility, and it could be our upper joint, so the lumbar spine, or lower joint, the knee joint. But as you saw in previous slide, those joints, both of these joints, need stability and not mobility. And for example, this is the reason why usually we have a low back pain problem, or we can have a knee problem. Low hip mobility will increase mobility of the knee joint, and we don't want this. or will increase the mobility of the lumbar spine, and we don't want this. And this is the reason why we can have, for example, low back pain syndrome. But also what is the consequence of low level of hip mobility? When we are considering performance outcomes, we can say that low hip mobility will decrease the athletic performance. For example, it has been shown in several articles that low level of hip mobility will decrease the level of strength, can decrease power outcome, and can decrease speed and change of direction speed outcome. So imagine, if you don't have enough hip mobility, you can develop, you will have less speed, you will have less strength and less power. So it seems that hip mobility is an issue in athletic performance. And what if somebody have a low level of hip mobility? Is this process irreversible? Luckily for us, it's not irreversible. We can train to have good level of hip mobility, or at least to increase the level of hip mobility to some degree, to some level. So there are some hip mobility drills that should be integrated daily, most likely daily, in the training process, and I will show you some of these drills. And these drills are so-called prehab or corrective exercise drills. Some of them are well known for now. We use them for 5 or 10 years in a row now, so most of athletes know them. But for example, very famous 1990 hip mobility drill with 2 positions, or several other drill that I will show you in a second. For example,
fencing stretch. Može.
For example, check this drill. It's called the fencing stretch, and it is the drill for the hip mobility per se. It's called the fencing because it resembles the fencing movement pattern, but generally this is the good hip mobility drill that will increase the mobility of the hip in any sport. Or some specific hip mobility drills for basketball. You can see she must go down with her hips and will increase the level. This girl has a serious hip mobility issue, and with doing this drill she will increase the hip mobility, a level of hip mobility. Or the best hip mobility drill that I know, it's consisted of 4 different patterns, 4 phases of movement. You see, this is the 3rd one, and now the 4th one, a deep squat position, knee back, adductor extension, then one leg over the other, rotate and increase the mobility in this plane, and back again. And now this same drill can be done in other side. So what can we say after today's lecture? Hip mobility, or the prehabilitation, or the drills that will decrease the chance of injury, are getting more and more included in the training process in the modern day, for the modern day athletes, because it is most likely that for the modern day athletes it is most important to be available to play the game, to be on the pitch, and that means that they are free of injury. When we are considering decreasing the injury risks, we can really consider the theory presented by Michael Boyle and Gray Cook, named joint by joint approach. Consciously, this concept said that every joint in our body has its specific function, and it's prone to specific dysfunction. When we discover the dysfunction of one of the joints, we can work on this deficiency by increasing mobility or increasing stability in some cases. One of the most important joints in our body is the hip. Is the hip per se, and the hip mobility is most likely the issue of most of the modern day athletes. I presented you some of the drills that you could regularly include in everyday practice in order to increase the level of hip mobility, and in that way you both decrease the injury risks but also increase the level of strength, power, speed and change of direction speed. So this is this was the end of the today lecture. I hope you enjoyed it and see you soon.